The other big story, Logan, was Joel Embiid returning to action. Didn't have Maxey out there. He only played 29 minutes, played a shorthanded OKC team without SGA or Jalen Williams. But Philly picked up a win. How much of a threat are they with Embiid back out there on the floor?
Philly's interesting. They're we're going to do our contender rankings soon, and so I was pondering this exact question. I mean, I think they're a top 10 contender. Now, that's not saying a whole lot. Like, I don't mean this in a disrespectful way to Philly, but they're among the Miami Heat of the world to me. They're among the back end of the competitive teams, close to Milwaukee, that Miami range. Embiid obviously changes things. I think you see this in his first game back. Like, Embiid opens up so much, just everything on the floor is so much easier because he commands so much attention from the defense. Like, he just does. And it's just evident. He puts up 24 points, 6 boards, 7 assists on 6 of 14 shooting. He goes 0 of 3 from deep, 12 of 12 from the line with 3 steals. Yeah, I mean, DHOs, pick and rolls, like just little actions that open up so many easy opportunities and shots for his teammates. Again, along with guys falling asleep on the back end because you have to. You got to help off Embiid, man. He torches single coverage. The mid-range J looked good. You mentioned he only plays 29 minutes per game. I thought the stamina and conditioning looked pretty solid from Embiid. The one area where I'm still really concerned is with the playmaking. He has 6 turnovers in this game. Deals with some double teams poorly. The bigger issue I had with Embiid offensively in this one in his return was just telegraphing some of his passes. Like, sometimes he just takes too long to get it out of his hands, where like he'll hold it above his hands. And normally he's so big and strong it doesn't matter. Guys don't normally have time to get their hand in the passing lanes, but the Thunder aren't a team that just let off the gas defensively. And Embiid telegraphed a lot of these passes. They got poked loose. I'm still scared about that. I'm still scared about him and his jump shot, failing. Again, it's a matter of he's been away from the game for a long time now. Like, and it's just a matter of him getting back up to game speed with a week to go. It's a really hard thing to ask of a guy. I don't care who you are. If you're a superstar, if you're a role player, it's really hard to ask a guy in a week or two to get fully ready for the playoffs. I mean, you saw the greatest player of all time, Michael Jordan, when he played baseball, came back, was it before the 95 season?
During the 95 season.
Yeah, during the 95 season, comes back with a few weeks left, and they get bounced by Orlando in the playoffs. So I don't think Philly has a championship ceiling. I don't think Philly has a real shot at making it out of the East. I don't think Philly has a real shot at winning the title. It's just really hard to ask a superstar player, any player for that matter, to come back on this short of notice and to get back to full game speed. Especially a player like Joel Embiid, when we've seen he's had his own inconsistencies in the playoffs. And I think they may rear their ugly head if his jump shot wanes, if he sputters playmaking. I'm not going to hold it crazily against Embiid. I know what Joel Embiid is. I know how he commands the game. I know what he does on the basketball court. He's one of the best players on planet Earth. And so I'm not going to hold the fact that he's not going to be back up full at 100%. It's encouraging. Obviously, Philadelphia is better with him on the floor. It's ridiculous to say that they're not. But I'm not moved, and I'm not going to hold it too much against Embiid if he's not perfect in this year's playoffs or the Sixers don't do crazy things. I think we can confidently evaluate and know what Embiid is like at this point. And his shortcomings are what they are, and his strengths are what they are. I will say this. If Embiid does find it, I mean, he is still a guy that can wreck a first-round series. He is still a guy that can completely wreck a series. Like, if he is on weaponizing his physicality, if his jumper is falling, I mean, again, you see it in this one where the mid-range pull-ups, it's just like it's unstoppable when that thing's hitting, man. The one thing that I'm pretty mad about announcers that, can we stop calling Jalen Williams the other Jalen Williams? Can we come up with another nickname for him or something, man? It just infuriates me on the broad. It just feels so disrespectful to a guy when we're consistently calling him the other Jalen Williams.
Well,
man.
He does have a nickname. They call the other Jalen Williams, meaning Jalen, J-Dub.
They call him J-Dub.
They call him J-Will.
So can the announcers get the memo? Can we call him Jay Will? It's frustrating.
Sure, man. Why don't you write a petition? Write a
I,
letter.
it just feels really disrespectful when we're doing that, man. He's
Well,
Jalen
you know what?
Williams
Maybe they
too.
shouldn't have taken two guys in the same draft
That's
named
fair.
Jalen Williams.
That's very fair.
That's my take on it all. Yeah, this was an interesting debut from Embiid. And when you talk about him and his playoff resume, obviously at some point he has to prove that his game can translate at the same level. And I have been very critical of him for his playoff shortcomings. At the same time, this year, given the context of this already relatively accelerated turn from a meniscus for a guy who historically has massive injury issues, carrying a huge burden in this situation. Like, if he doesn't deliver this year in the playoffs, and if through these next 2 weeks leading up, he doesn't look like the Joel Embiid that we saw for the first 35 games of the season, where he was averaging 35 a night and scoring 40 and 50 seemingly at will, then obviously we need to apply that context, and we can't hold it against him in the same way that we have years past. And honestly, I probably wouldn't hold it much against him at all, because he did look different in this game. First of all, slimmer than I've seen him in years. Nick Nurse talked about the fact that he went out there and lost some weight. I would like to know how much weight, because that was literally the first thing I noticed turning on this game. This looked like a much younger Joel Embiid, and he didn't look fully comfortable yet coming back from this injury, which isn't surprising in his first game back, but it was a very jump shooting heavy performance. He only took one shot inside of 10 feet. And to be fair, there are some physical drives that aren't recorded on the stat sheet, because basically every time that he engaged in a physical drive, he got fouled. He took 12 free throws in this game against just 14 shots. OKC is not a team that is built to handle a Joel Embiid. They're just not. They are too small, they're too slight, and yes, they do have the sort of quick perimeter athletes who can frustrate him and fluster him on doubles and whatnot. We saw like Brooklyn last year, right? That is a team that was completely undersized, but they were so long and athletic and intense and just pest-like that they forced him into a lot of turnovers, and Embiid did have 6 turnovers in this game, but regardless, it just felt like he wasn't comfortable being as aggressive and physical as normal. Took a lot of tough twos, even if there were multiple defenders on him in a couple spots. And he was tested as a playmaker. It sort of simulated that playoff environment in some ways, because you know that teams are going to test his playmaking. He's improved this year, clearly, but that has been the mold to making Joel Embiid struggle. It has been sending multiple defenders at him and seeing if he can hold up in those situations and consistently make the right decisions and protect the ball, and he hasn't. And he got a little juiced up version of that in this game because Maxey is out, so the Philly was down a high-level offensive threat, and as great as Chet is, OKC just doesn't have anybody who can match up with him in single coverage, so they basically had to send 2 defenders his way, had to at least have a second defender sinking into the free throw line, even if Embiid was taking a jumper. And I thought it was a solid performance on that front. I thought that he did make some solid kickouts. He also got involved running some handoffs, but you mentioned did also have a couple turnovers that were generated by that ball pressure on doubles, missed an interior pass when things were getting a little bit mucked up, was off target, committed an offensive foul in one situation. So it wasn't good on the turnover front. And he's going to have to get a lot more comfortable in 2 weeks. He is going to have to look like the Joel Embiid that we saw for the first couple months of this year, who was an actual superhero. But that's what this Philly team needs. The expectation for this year was not that they would be contending. It was that this was going to be a little bit of a reset. This was going to be, okay, let's see what Maxey looks like as an offensive number 2. And they did a nice job of acquiring some quality wings, Batum and Oubre. But the expectations losing James Harden coming off of what was already a brutal playoff exit were not, hey, this is going to be the best Philly team that we've seen. So overall, I am not super optimistic about their playoff outlook. They have been a dominant team with Embiid on the floor this year. They're 27-8 when he plays. And if they can get out of that play-in particularly, so if they can avoid Milwaukee/Boston, I really think they can win a playoff series. I would probably pick them depending on how Embiid looks over these next couple weeks, because I do think that their ceiling is higher than Cleveland's, but they still have issues because A, we don't know what version of Embiid we're going to get. B, Tyrese Maxey, as great as he was in the early stretch of this year, I think we have seen has some issues still if he is going to be your number one option from the perimeter, particularly in the non-Embiid stretch of the season. His efficiency just tanked. His efficiency as a pull-up shooter in particular tanked. He's 33% from mid-range this year, 32% from three. I absolutely think it was a very difficult task for him to have to carry the load like that in a non-Embiid stretch, but the fact that we're talking about real low-end efficiency, like 4 or 5 points below league average, indicates that as much as I love Maxey, and I've loved him forever, like he is not among the high-end guards that maybe some were ready to compare him to in terms of how he can float an offense, and Embiid's going to make anybody look better because he consumes so much defensive attention. So I like Maxey. I still think we need to see him hold up at that level, and they need him to be pretty damn good. We also don't know when D'Anthony Melton is going to be back, and I think he's an important role player. He's been out over a month with this back thing, and there is not, to my knowledge, a timetable on his return, and we're knocking on the door of the playoffs now. So there's questions here. Their spot-up shooting hasn't been great this year, but long-term, I really like the vision, and I am optimistic about this team being a move or two away. I do like the adds of Batum and Oubre. I really like the Hield pickup mid-season. They've added some athleticism on the wings. They've added some offensive skill. They are reasonably close, but they are still clearly a tier below from Boston. I mean, a couple tiers below in terms of all-around talent. And Milwaukee still has a more proven dominant formula of, hey, we are going to have these two dominant basketball players in a playoff setting. Even if Dame hasn't consistently been that great this year, he's had ups and downs. He's just so much more proven in that setting than Maxey is. So Philly's a team that can win a series. I'd be really surprised if they won two. And the most important thing is just that Embiid looks like himself and can play somewhat like himself. And hopefully Maxey does hold up relatively well as that number two. And then it's like, all right, we have our core together, and now we can use some of these assets and use the picks that we got from the Harden deal and get ourselves into true contention for next year.
What do you think that asset is? Like if it's on the margins or if it's a big swing for somebody, what other kind of players do you think Philly needs to acquire to realize that championship ceiling?
Well, I think that it would be ideal for them to have a more consistent third option offensively, because I don't think that Maxey is going to be at that consistent like top 15 player level that you would ideally like your number two to be at if you're trying to go on a title run, or you would want to have, again, that collective of our number two and number three are both very good, and they can kind of trade off having these clear star level nights like what you saw from Milwaukee in 2021, where Middleton and Holiday were both inconsistent, but they also both had their nights where they were the man, and that's what that team needed. So upgrading the Tobias Harris slot, I think, is probably the most impactful move that they can make, because I don't think that they're going to put another lead guard alongside Maxey, although I think that could work because we've seen that Maxey is so good off ball. He's so good in transition. He's so great as a spot-up player that he is a true combo guard, and I think that he works either as a primary ball handler or as a secondary ball handler. So I think they do need another star-level player offensively right now. It doesn't have to be a superstar-level player, but somebody who can be a top three option for them.
Yeah, I don't think they're that far off either. And I do like the Hield pickup. Oubre has been balling out of control for this team in Embiid's absence. Yeah. Do you like them more than Miami?
Man,
I know that's
how am
tough,
I supposed
right?
to answer a question like that? I think those are clearly the two most dangerous lower seeds.
Mm-hmm.
Although now things are getting weird because the Magic have slid in front of the Knicks. And I have my concerns about the Knicks, too, just because of health and the fact that they're going to be out of rhythm as a basketball team when it comes to the playoffs. I think that they have a higher ceiling than the Heat because of the fact that Embiid can just go nuclear, but the Heat have voodoo magic, and the Heat have two very reliable stars in these playoff environments, and they're going to defend really well, and they're going to give teams fits with their coaching. So it might be matchup dependent this year, honestly.
Give me Miami. Give me Miami.
Yeah, I think that probably Miami is a more uncomfortable draw, but I don't know, man. Philly was killing people earlier this season when Embiid was healthy. They were just killing people. So I do think their ceiling, because of basketball talent and because of how dominant their best player can be, is a little bit higher. Either way, I think it's good that Embiid is back because it doesn't feel like a lost season for Philly. At the same time, if he has any sort of health complications because of this, and also just if he really struggles in the playoffs, like, that's just going to be bad for the vibes because everybody is going to be shitting on Embiid again. But the injury is the real concern because ultimately, I don't think they're going to do anything too meaningful in this year's playoff run. And then it's like, was it worth it to rush our best and injury-prone player back? Maybe not. But if he wants to be out there, when he's been having a special season when healthy, who's to say that he can't be out there? And it'll be interesting to see what they can do.